Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, the highly criticised visit of Egypt's President Sisi has been rather overshadowed by the stranding of up to 20,000 British tourists in the resort of El-Sheikh by David Cameron. The Prime Minister explained his decision to suspend flights after the Russian plane crash last weekend, saying it was more likely than not the disaster was caused by a bomb. In the last few minutes, EasyJet and Thomson have both said they'll start flying home passengers who have carry-on luggage only. Our chief correspondent, Alex Thompson, reports.
There is no precedent for a British government shutting down an international tourist air corridor as they did last night. And this, he says, is why he did it.
What we need to put in place is more security at that airport so it's safe to fly people home. That's our priority. That's what we'll work with the Egyptians to do. Look, we cannot be certain that the Russian airliner was brought down by a terrorist bomb, but it looks increasingly likely that that was the case. And so I act on the intelligence, I act on the advice of experts, and it's the right thing to do to suspend these flights until we can safely bring people home.
And tonight, Moscow is incandescent.
Honestly, what's really shocking is the realisation that the British government has some kind of information that could shed light on what happened in the skies above Egypt. And it turns out that the information, if it exists, was never shared with the Russian side. This is truly shocking.
Interestingly, Russia too asked Egypt to beef up airport security at Sharm today. The Germans increased the level of their travel advice, two countries who have even more tourists there than the British. Last night, the British security team went through Sharm el-Sheikh's airport security and they did not like what they found, which tallies with British tourists who say X-ray screenings half-hearted, checks on fluids all but non-existent. One took a diving knife right through security undetected. And Maureen Corr was horrified to be offered the chance to bypass airport security altogether for payment, both on arrival and departure a week later.
I was approached by a Muslim woman, dressed in Muslim clothing, who said to me that I could avoid the queues at passport control, avoid security if I came with her.
No wonder last night's Cobra meeting decided to stop all flights.
Any update?
Leaving up to 20,000 British tourists unable to leave until tomorrow at the earliest. EasyJet and Monarch plan 14 flights to bring people out tomorrow if cleared.
This morning we had a letter pushed under our door explaining everything. We went and met the rep and they've been absolutely fantastic. There's a complete sense of calm here. Nobody's panicking or anything.
David Cameron shook hands with Egypt's brutal military dictator in London today. Talk about bad timing. Egypt says British action is premature, and it's emerged Britain was satisfied with airport security at Sharm when it was raised 10 months ago. Nobody can know who is right in this as yet. But we know this, like the provisional IRA of yesteryear, IS only say they have done something when they have done something, and say it they did from the outset with regard to this air crash.
We say we downed it, so you may die in anger. We did not have to tell you how we did it. Gather the plane wreckage and search your black box and analyse as much as you like and prove to us that we did not bring the plane down or how it happened.
The Foreign Office advice map of Egypt shows a huge area of the Nile Valley as green, safe. But watch this. When you zoom in to the Sinai Peninsula, virtually all of it is red, don't travel under any circumstances, or orange, only go if you have to. Sharm el-Sheikh appears as a tiny green safe spot, surrounded by unsafe territory. Unsafe because IS is active across the peninsula, highly trained, technically first class. Another sophisticated car bomb in a supposedly secure area, only today. 6 main groups operate here with links to Libya IS to the west. Many are derived from Bedouin tribes, long excluded from Egypt's political mainstream and the tourist money on the coast.
They are a combination of native Sinai Bedouins, native Egyptians from the Nile Valley, from the Nile Delta and Upper Egypt provinces, different governorates, and they have a smaller fraction of Palestinian jihadists from mainly the south of the Gaza Strip.
Thus, the politics of security swirl across the globe from the forlorn sight of the wreckage itself. The search area widened today and drones brought in to assist. In Russia itself, they have now identified 50 of the 224 passengers and crew who perished. There were more burials today.
So it hasn't been much of a welcome for Egypt's President Sisi, who, as Alex Thompson was reporting, has been meeting David Cameron in Downing Street today. Outside the gates, noisy protests about his country's human rights, whilst inside, talks with a man whose anti-terror precautions have just dealt a body blow to Egypt's all-important tourist trade. This afternoon, the two leaders insisted they were working together in a spirit of close cooperation. Our political correspondent Michael Crick has this report.
Sisi's trip was bound to spark controversy. A man who seized power in a military coup only 2 years ago, before his elected predecessor was condemned to death. Outside Downing Street this morning, pro and anti groups were out in force.
So on this side, in yellow, supporters of the previous president, Mohamed Morsi, now of course sentenced to death. Ranged against them, supporters of the current regime.
Together against terrorists, read their banners. Not quite though, since Britain's decision last night to suspend flights to and from Sharm El-Sheikh has upset President Sisi and his friends.
What do you think about suspending the flights?
It's a stunt.
It's a stunt?
Yes, this is my view. What about the other one? What about the other airline? What about the other airline?
Human rights activists protested at the 40,000 people reportedly detained since Sisi took power. Many killed or tortured or vanished.
What is the British values now? I need to ask him, what is the British values when he's shaking hands with a murderer, with a killer?
The strains behind President Sisi's visit were hidden by the red carpet, the smiles and handshakes. But we got a glimpse of the divide later when Sisi revealed Egypt had complied with British security concerns expressed 10 months ago.
10 months ago, we were asked by our British friends to send teams to Sharm El-Sheikh airport to make sure that all the security procedures there are well enough and provide the adequate safety and security for the passengers, and we understood their concern.
David Cameron said his duty was to keep British citizens safe.
If it is the case, we can't be sure, but if it is the case, it's more likely than not a terrorist bomb on that plane. And my job is to take the right action.
As Sisi and his nervous-looking team left number 10, there was an unusual row on the street. An Arab reporter tried to ask him about the 40,000 people detained, only for Sisi's supporters to shout the journalist down.
Michael Crick reporting. Well, while Mr. Sisi was holding talks with David Cameron, MPs were busy raising concerns about Egypt's human rights record in the Commons, including the case of Ibrahim Halawa, an Irish teenager who has been held in an Egyptian jail for the last 2 years. Ibrahim was just 17 when he was arrested during the Egyptian military crackdown against protesters. He has been held without trial, and his family claim he's been tortured. Well, joining me now is Ibrahim's sister, Sumaya Halawa, and you were with him at the time he was arrested. What were you doing there?
So basically, I was arrested with Ibrahim. We were just peacefully protesting. Then we took refuge in the mosque because obviously police armies and officers started to attack and kill everyone. So we just spent a day in the mosque. We just wanted to go home. That's all we wanted. They actually refused us. They refused to leave us basically, and then they arrested us at that day after 17 hours in the mosque.
And you were let go, and he was sent to jail. Is that right? Or?
Yeah, basically, this is the question. Like, I have no answer to that question until that day. If we were arrested, investigated together, given the same charges, we were let go, and Ibrahim still remains in prison, and I don't know why.
And what is he now accused of?
Basically, in the file, well, his file actually, there's no case to hold. Like, he doesn't have any evidence against them. He was basically.
So no evidence has ever been presented to him.
Again, he's given 16 charges, but none of them. Obviously, one of them is killing protesters, and which means he could be facing death penalty. Amnesty, obviously, he's amnesty prisoner of conscience, which means he's not facing. There's no case to hold.
So what kind of conditions is he being held in now?
The worst condition. Ibrahim is being held in one of the worst prisons in Egypt, Wadi al-Natron. Just anyone to search about Wadi al-Natron, they would realize no any human in the world, even if they're criminals, to live in that place. He's denied his basic human rights. He's denied his basic necessities. Panadol. My mom went to visit him last week. He said, "My mom, look, I have a bad pain. Can you get me painkiller?" Panadol was refused. He's been along with criminals. He's suffering from a bad back pain. He suffers from eczema. He never had a problem with his chest. He used an inhaler. He sleeps on the floor. He's on hunger strike now for 2 weeks because he's not been treated as a human person, as an Irish citizen. He's not been treated he's been treated as an actually criminal, where he didn't do anything.
So what do you think Britain could do to help, given he's Irish?
Ibrahim is an EU citizen. First of all, he's a human, and then he's an EU citizen. Britain can help, and first of all, inviting Sisi to England is putting hand and clapping for him and saying, "Well done to what you did." I don't think this is something we're all looking for. This is something it does encourage him. It just makes him feel hasn't know that. Not just Ibrahim. There's over 40,000 in prison, including Ibrahim.
What do you think when you see these images of President Sisi in Downing Street? I mean, do you feel the wool is being pulled over our eyes a little?
It just feels that we're in a time that we actually clap for the oppressor, and put the oppressed ones in prison. It's been actually opposite. He's the one he's the one denied, arrested my brother, beated him, like Ibrahim was beaten, tortured. He was electrocuted for no reason. I think British could, we need to practice what we preach. British preaches for democracy, for human rights, but I'm sorry, this is when it comes to the reality. He's a dictator. He's a killer. He arrested my brother. He's done. It's the place where he remains is not. We don't need to sit, to just put our hands in. Your
case was raised today in Parliament. How much support do you feel you're getting from the British government?
Well, we've wrote a letter to David Cameron, hoping to ask for Sisi to release Ibrahim. It's been 2 years and 2 months now. He hasn't been in a proper trial. Every time trial is being postponed for no reason. He hasn't been, proper trial. I hope I hope David Cameron puts this should be one of his priority as an EU citizen, and be more into the case and ask Sisi to release my brother and others in prison.
Samaya Halawa, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
I've been getting